What's happening, Crossroads family? Pastor Daniel here. One of the things I love so much about our family of faith, the Crossroads family, is that every single Sunday, someone's gonna open up the Bible, they're gonna read God's word, and they're gonna say, hey, this is what it says. So today, you have the pleasure of hearing from our beloved executive pastor of ministries, Pastor Gabe Moreno. Listen, if you've been at Crossroads for any length of time, you know Pastor Gabe. You love him. You love his joy in the Lord. You love the way that God uses him. And it's always such a blast to see his bright, shining light bouncing around the Crossroads family. But if you're new to Crossroads, what you need to know is this guy is a great guy. We love Pastor Gabe. We love his bride, Brittany, his kids, and the way that God uses them here at Crossroads. So listen, in a moment, as we always do, you're gonna see a sermon intro video. And when Pastor Gabe makes his way into the Crossroads pulpit, I want all of you to stand, even if you're online. I want to give Pastor Gabe Moreno the loudest Crossroads welcome.
Hey, we meet again. Oh my God. We meet again, church. Thank you so much. We always got to have Pastor Daniel's blessing on who the speaker is. So I love that he gets to introduce us. Well, listen, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. So open your Bibles. It's in the New Testament. The 13th chapter is like the most famous chapter of the Bible, I think. It's a beautiful piece of poetry, but you know, as I was researching, the studying for this message, I stumbled upon another poem. An ancient poem. It's very eloquent. It's on par with like a T.S. Eliot. It's up there, you guys. It's an amazing poem. And I wanted to read to you some of the stanzas, some of the phrases from this poem, because I think it does a great job kind of summarizing what our topic is today. So if you're a fan of the Bible, the New Testament, and you're in the scriptures, you may know that 1 Corinthians 13 is a love chapter. If you've been to a wedding in the last 3 months, you've probably heard it read. But I want to read to you this other poem, this poem that I found in researching it, because I'm telling you guys, these lyrics are fuego. They are fire. They are so good. And I think it's going to help you kind of understand what our theme is today, okay? So check this out. Here we go. All right. Again, this is loosely translated from an ancient language, so some of the stuff gets lost as I read this. The power of love is a curious thing. Make one man weep, make another man sing. Come on, baby. Change a hawk to a little white dove. More than a feeling, that's the power of love. Let me skip down to where it really gets really good. Don't need money. Don't take fame. Don't need no credit card to ride this train. It's strong and it's sudden. It's cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life. Finish with me. That's the power of love. Oh my gosh, you guys are all amazingly educated. Yes, that's a great poem. All right, 1985 Billboard hit for Huey Lewis and the News. It was so good. It was the first Billboard hit that they ever had. But I think if you go back and read those lyrics, I think that they speak to a generation that really hungered for something deeper, right? Again, some of these descriptions, if you read all the lyrics, are a little shallow. But man, it does highlight the fact that we don't have a full understanding of what the word love means. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this, but 1 Corinthians 13 is actually a poem itself. Some theologians believe that it was a poem that Paul was inspired to write, and then as he was writing the letter to the church of Corinth, he inserted that poem there in between chapters 12 and 14, because the train of thought as you read through it, 12 and 14 really read together, and then there's like this poem in there. But maybe it's because Paul was really trying to identify what the real power of love is. Now, we got to take a break before we go into this passage, and I got to give you guys a really brief Greek lesson, okay? I'm not a Greek scholar. I don't speak Greek. But as I dug in it, there's really good research into the use of this word love. Now, the word love is within the top 100 words most commonly used in the Bible. In the Bible, the word love, depending on the translation, and specifically this word that we're gonna define here in a moment, is used over 500 times, depending on which translation of the Bible that you use. But the Greek language is a lot more descriptive when it uses the word love. C.S. Lewis did a lot of work here. If you know C.S. Lewis, he wrote like Chronicles of Narnia. He had a really cool sci-fi trilogy that I really, really like. So check him out. But he wrote a book called The Four Loves. And in it, he goes in and he uses the Greek language to understand what the real meaning of love is. The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. But in it, we learn that the Greek language has a couple more, but about 4 words to use the word love. Now for me, right, and for all of us, we use the love in the English language very generally. I love my wife. I love carne asada tacos, right? Like, I love the Kansas City Chiefs. I love my kids. Like in the same phrase, we use the word love very generally, and it's crazy. But in the Greek, they kind of break it down some. So I want to break it down for you, okay? So the first word in the Greek for the word love is eros, E-R-O-S. I won't spell all these because my spelling's hideous. But eros is where we get our word for erotic. It's a sensual, intimate, physical love. You can have eros towards someone, hopefully within the confines of marriage. That's what the Bible teaches. But you have eros, so that is a word for love. Number 2, you have the word phileo. That's brotherly or friendship love, right? We get the city Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So you can say, I phileo my younger brother. I phileo fish. You know, like one of the things. You can do that. You can do that. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, storge. Now, storge is kind of like, this is like a familial love. Like the love that a father has for a son, you know, like the parent-child dynamic. That's storge. So in the Greek, when you're reading passages about how this father loved his family, it would use the word storge in for love. And then finally, the word that is used the most often, and the word that's used 8 times in 1 Corinthians 13 is the word agape, okay? It's where in our English language we get the word for agony, and we'll talk about why that is. But the word agape, it's beautiful. In the words of Ellen Redpath, he's a theologian, he says that he defines agape as a sacrificing, a selfless, self-denial, sacrificing service for one another. That's what agape is. Now, in our culture and in Huey Lewis and the News's world, right, their order of priorities in the word love is contrary to what the scriptures are. And you guys see this today in movies, TVs, you guys see this in culture, right? Where really what we see in today's culture is when someone meets another person, they find them attractive, the first kind of love they want is eros, right? They're like, we're gonna be intimate, we're gonna sleep with one another. And then if my needs are met and if I like you, and if I want something more after my own erotic needs are met, then maybe I will phileo you. Maybe we'll be friends, right? That's the way the culture works. That's how like popular culture tells you how to find love. First, you have erotic love, and then you have friendship love. Right? Now, if your needs are met then, and you're like, yeah, I could see myself being friends with this person. Yeah, why not? And these other 2 boxes are checked. Why don't we then become family? Why don't we move in together? Now, I don't want a full commitment. I don't want you. I just want what you have to offer. I just want your body, right? So I will storge you. We'll be family-ish, And then if you pass all those tests and you check all those boxes, then and only maybe then will I have agape love for you. Then maybe I will self-deny, self-sacrifice, and serve you. That's the way the world tells you to approach relationships. What we find in 1 Corinthians 13 is that order is inverted. It's right side up. It's like, no. When you meet someone and the Lord has called you in a relationship, you go in with the posture that Jesus had, self-denying, self-sacrificing in service of one another, right? And then after that, you get married, you become family. As you grow closer and closer together, you become friends. Like you actually want to be with this person all the time. This is like your best friend. You have the same hobbies, you have the same interests. You're a great friend to them. Philippians chapter 2 talks about how friendship should look like. And then finally, and within the confines of a healthy, agape, committed relationship, then eros is applied. So it's interesting that the Bible presents it that way in how it deconstructs what our culture deems to be the appropriate way to go about it. So now that we have an understanding, when we read the word love here today, it's not talking about eros, it's not talking about phileo, it's not talking about storge, it's talking about agape love, self-denying, self-sacrificing, in service of another, okay? So we pick it up, and we're gonna read the whole chapter. It's just 13 verses here together. Here we go. Paul's poem now, in contrast to Huey Lewis and the News's poem. Here's Paul's poem. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understanding all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long, it is kind. Love does not envy, love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up, it doesn't behave rudely, it does not seek its own, it's not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. And whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. Our first point as we look at what love is and what it isn't, the first thing that we want to look at is that in these first couple verses, verses 1-3, is we find out that love isn't loud. Now, Paul says, if you have not love and you're speaking in tongues, and we believe in the biblical use of tongues here at Crossroads. We believe that the gifts are for today. At our pre-service gatherings, there are times where Pastor Daniel leads us in opportunities for people to speak in tongues. And if, just like it talks about in 1 Corinthians 12 and 14, if there are interpretations available for those tongues and we'll allow it, we'll receive it. We believe that, this is truth. But listen, you can speak in heavenly languages, but if you have not love, Paul says you are nothing. You're just loud and annoying. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, Paul's trying to make the point that the real biblical definition of love is gonna fuel how you try to use the gifts that God has given you. Now, I remember as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about when I first met my wife and how loud and annoying I was. Like those really annoying, like lovey-dovey couples, like when they're around you and we all know the types of things that they do. I mean, I did it. Like, I think it was after date number 1. Yeah, it was like date number 1. I was like Buddy from Elf. Like, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it, It's like we had tea and like a croissant, and I was in love. I knew everything I needed to know about my wife. Not only was I loud and obnoxious, I was bragging about it. I was boasting and posting about it, praising. We had all the annoying nicknames. I'll give you guys one. Honey Buns was a nickname that I thought was appropriate for my wife when we were dating. Hi, Honey Buns. And it just drove our friends crazy. Constant hand holding, right? Annoying couple things, just loud, obnoxious. The PDA, I mean, come on. Just loud and obnoxious. I had no idea what love really was. It was just loud. And there's some coolness, about it. And there's some excitement and some butterflies in your stomach. But listen, we are doing the gospel a tremendous disservice if we think that love is just a feeling. Love isn't loud. What Paul is hinting at too here is his own heritage. You see, the church in Corinth, it was a port city, a port land. It was surrounded, it had waterways and ships had access to it. It was busy, it was popping, booming economy. And the idea behind how people approached life in the city permeated how people approached church and fellowship. It was very transactional. It was like, I'm giving in order to get. That's called taking. So people just bounce around from church to church. They're like, this one, I don't like that. I'm gonna go to another one. I'm gonna find a better one. It was very transactional. Paul's saying like, what are we doing? That's not love. That's not commitment. That's not the love of Jesus. And even in his own past, Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He said, he remembered how even the Pharisees were attention getting in the way that they served the poor. Jesus talked about this in the Gospels. He said how the Pharisees would blow trumpets whenever they were making a donation so that the whole town center would see and be like, oh, wow, look at them. Man, they're really spiritual. Paul is saying you can have all that stuff, but if you have not love, you are nothing. If anything, you're just loud and annoying. We have to have love in everything that we do. Josiah Gregory cited something really, really cool. He's a Bible theologian guy. He says, he who has not the love of God is like a man filling his heart, is like an empty wagon coming violently down a hill. It makes a great noise because there's nothing in it. Think about that. The more that the wagon is filled and it makes less noise as it travels. If you don't have the love of God, you're really just a clanging cymbal and people aren't seeing the love of God in your life. Love isn't loud. Jump down with me to verses 4-7. They read this way. Now, this is gonna be a lot of fun. As we read this, I'm gonna ask you guys to do something for me. As we read this, and Pastor Daniel did this some years ago, and I think it's a really healthy self-assessment, kind of like an inventory. So I'm gonna pull random names out of my head as I read this passage. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take those names, and every time the word love is in there, I'm gonna drop that name in there. So it might be random. I might call out your name. If I do, come talk to me in the family room. I wanna pray for you. But I'm not picking on anyone. I'm literally just pulling out rando names here. But as you guys read along, I want you to insert your own name, okay? When I say a random name, you put in your own name. And then we're gonna see if we add up to what love really is. Now, as we read through this, our second point, this is really important. If love isn't loud, love also isn't lame. And I'm gonna explain that here in a bit, but let me read this with some names. You're gonna put your names in it. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Here we go. So instead of love suffers long, I'm gonna say, Randy suffers long and is kind. Charles does not envy. Catherine does not parade herself. Catherine is not puffed up. Cindy does not behave rudely. Larry does not seek his own. Michael is not provoked. Michelle thinks no evil. Marisela does not rejoice in iniquity. I really reached for that name. Stephen rejoices in the truth. Kevin bears all things. Diana believes all things. Anna hopes all things, and Richard endures all things. Obviously, when we read those names, if you know someone like that, you're like, I don't know if you know my buddy Richard. That guy does not endure all things, okay? I don't know if you know Marisela, but that girl, but think about reading your own name into that passage. Right away, you realize, I am not this. Now, that could either be incredibly discouraging, and the goal of today's sermon isn't to tell you to try harder. That's not the point of our time together today. Just try harder. That's like telling someone to try to bench 400 pounds. Just try harder. Like, you're gonna get hurt. You should probably do less weight. But what this is an opportunity for us to find out what love really is. Now, what we see in this section is love is first described as two things. It suffers long, meaning it's patient, and it's kind. I don't know about a Larry or a Randy, but I know that this is true about Jesus, that he's patient and that he's kind. Next, we read 8 things that love isn't. I don't know about these people that we put their names in there, but I know that Jesus doesn't envy. I know Jesus doesn't parade himself. I know Jesus isn't puffed up. I know Jesus isn't rude. I know that Jesus doesn't seek his own. I know that he's not provoked. I know that he doesn't think of evil. He doesn't even rejoice in iniquity. Like we start to see that Jesus is the definition of love, that Jesus is the power of love. The last four examples are, again, a reminder of what love really is. Look at this. Ask yourself, is your marriage this way? Do you parent this way? Do you bear all things? Do you believe the best? Do you hope in all things? And then do you endure all things? I don't know if you do, but I know that Jesus does. All of these words, these 14 descriptions, I don't think it's a coincidence that they're all verbs. Why is that important? Well, it kind of reiterates our point. Love isn't lame, meaning it isn't crippled, demolished on the floor, unwilling, unable to stand. Love is an action. What kind of action is it? Jesus' perfect obedience led to his death for you and for me and for all those who would place their trust in him. That's the gospel. Jesus' perfect obedience led him to action. What does the Bible tell us? Pastor Daniel talked about this last week, the most famous verse in the Bible. For God so loved, he agaped, self-denial, self-sacrificing in service of another. That's the gospel. That's what Jesus did. That's what we're incapable of doing on our own, but it is the resume of Jesus that we hold on to. This is why he's a savior. If your friends at work ask you, why should I follow Jesus? It's all the same thing. All religions are the same thing. Whatever. You don't have to follow Jesus. Why do I have to worship Jesus? 1 Corinthians 13. I could give you 14 reasons why I should follow Jesus. These are the reasons. This is his resume. Why wouldn't you want to devote your life to this? Why wouldn't you want to build your marriage on this? Why wouldn't you want to pursue every relationship this is? Why wouldn't you want to be this kind of boss? Why wouldn't you want to be this kind of friend? Why wouldn't you want to be this kind of coworker? That's the power of love. Self-denying, self-sacrificing in service of another. It's action-oriented. It's not feelings-based. And as much as I loved feeling like Buddy the Elf in the movie Elf and screaming, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it, I was just loud and was nothing. Because listen, once we finally got married, I really learned the depths of my love, I remember our first fight. Don't tell my wife I'm telling you guys this. Our first fight was over peanuts. Literally peanuts. I was making this salad and we had some roasted peanuts. I'm like, hey, you should put some peanuts in your salad. They're really good for you. And she was like, no, I don't want peanuts. I'm like, you should like peanuts. Everyone likes peanuts, George Washington Carver liked peanuts. Like, come on. We got in a fight over peanuts. And then she didn't want to eat the salad and then I didn't love her anymore. Like, that's what happens. You find out the depths of your love when you serve someone, don't you? And I always used to think, man, I have the gift of service. But I'll tell you, man, you don't really find out the motive of your heart if you think you have the gift of service until someone treats you like a servant. How does it feel when you do something nice for someone and they don't acknowledge you? You're like, I don't love you anymore. You're out of my life, right? Get out of here. Talk to the hand. Get out of my face. We do that because our love doesn't match up to the scriptural definition of what love is. Verses 8 through 10. Hey, this is really, really cool. We get to some deep theology here. Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away with. Now, Paul is talking about the charismata, another Greek word here for the flashy gifts. The gifts that everyone wants. Prophecy, oh my gosh, what is that? Well, basically, and this is really reduced, so you theology people, you can beat me up later. But essentially, if preaching is the sum of teaching and exhortation or encouragement, if that's what teaching and preaching is, then prophecy kind of has the basic elements of prediction and revelation. It's truth telling. There is a component of forecasting, but these things only happen rarely. I hold to the opinion that everything that God wanted to say, he kind of wrote it down, right? So I should probably focus on this thing, but that is an aspect of prophecy. We believe that gift is at work today. I've seen the gift of prophecy at work today, but Paul's saying you're not always gonna need prophecy. You just won't, because when Jesus shows up, we won't need to prophesy. So that gift has an expiration date, right? It's like the milk at the back of your fridge. And then he goes on to talk about tongues. And again, we believe in tongues. It's an important gift. We need it. It edifies the individual. If there's interpretation and it's done properly and in order, it builds up the whole church. It's a great thing. But we also here at Crossroads don't believe that tongues is gibberish. I don't believe that. Biblical, God-given, Spirit-inspired tongues, it's not gibberish. But also important to know, tongues is not a mark of spiritual maturity. And just because you can speak in tongues, if you don't have love, you're still a baby in the faith. You're a toddler. So you got to have love. So that runs out. And then finally, knowledge. Paul says if there's knowledge, it's going to vanish away. This really challenged me because you know what? I don't know about you guys, but I just forget 90% of what I read. So I know this is deeper than that, and there's some Greek involved here. But listen, knowledge will end. The Bible says that knowledge puffs you up, but it says that love edifies. And I want to challenge some of you. When it comes to Bible reading, and I know this is true in my life, and I think it's true in some of your lives, I pray that we would move away from reading the Bible for information and that we would move towards reading the Bible for transformation. I think that's why I stuck our names in that love definition. Because when you read the Bible that way, like, Lord, is this me? When you say, Lord, change this about me, I'm not patient, I don't suffer long. When you start to read the scriptures that way, when you start to read the scriptures, Lord, I'm gonna start reading what your word says about how I'm supposed to love my wife. And I'm gonna let that dictate how I treat her. That's the authority of scripture. That's something that is lacking in our culture today. These things will end, but love will never end. Why? Because love is selfless. Someone once said, within regards to marriage and relationships, that if you want a bad marriage, I don't know who'd ever want to plan how to do that, but if you'd want a bad marriage, you put yourself first. He went on to say, if you want a good marriage, like you don't want a bad one, but you want a good marriage, you put your spouse first. And that sounds good. I'm like, well, I could do that. That's pretty good. But if you want a great marriage, and you could really substitute anything in there, couldn't you? If you want to be a great parent, if you want to be a great employee, if you want to be a great friend, if you want a great marriage, you put Jesus first. Love isn't selfless. It's the love of Christ that changes us. Now, these final verses really kind of bring all this to head and really kind of reveal why it's important for us to self-examine in light of the scriptures. You see, in verse 11 and 12, Paul says something that's really convicting to my own heart. He says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. When I became a man, I put away all these childish things. Because for right now, I see in a mirror dimly. But then on that day when Jesus shows up, we'll see him face to face. Because I know in part, but then I shall know also as I am known. What we find here in this final passage is that Paul's confessing that there was a season in his life where it was totally okay to view the world through the lens of a child. And children really, like a great way to understand how foolish it is to have childish understanding is think about a child, but think about having a roommate that acted like a child, right? Like children, right? Will come in your bedroom when you're asleep with no regard, will knock on the bathroom door when you're in there having a meeting. They want to be washed. They want to be fed. They want to be changed. They want to complain. They don't like what you're watching. They want to watch Teletubbies, if that's even around anymore. I don't know. If your roommate, your spouse, acted like a child, it would be totally inappropriate. You'd be like, I don't want to live with this person anymore. Do you have a childish understanding of what love is? Because what Paul says is when I became a man, I put away those childish things. Our final point today is that love is sincere. And in Paul's culture, specifically to that Corinthian city, this is really cool, you guys. If you walk away with anything, I hope this is it. You see, all throughout the Greek world, a big way where they made their money was in the making of statues. Marble or alabaster, and those are all the rock types I know. You geologists out there, come talk to me later. But they would take these rocks and they would chisel them away and make a statue, right? And this was their livelihood. This is how they made their income. And you can imagine that maybe they're working and they're carving around the face and maybe they hit the nose and the nose falls off. And now it's like, how am I gonna make money off of this, right? So a common practice in their day was to take the filings, the shavings from the rock, and then get some hot wax, melt it, and they would make like a paste, like a cement. And then they would take that nose or that arm or whatever, and they would put it back on the statue. And then they would try to sell it at the marketplace. Now, a wise consumer, a wise patron, what they would do is they would look at the statue, and before buying, they would ask this question. They would say, is this statue sincere? You see, that word means without wax. So when you say I'm being sincere, you're saying I'm without wax, I'm without deception. And if the vendor said, yeah, it's without wax, go ahead and buy it, a really wise consumer would take that statue and they would hold it up to the light and they would let the sun shine through the cracks to see where all the brokenness is. I think for a lot of us, we're like those broken statues. Our identity, our persona that we manage, that outward appearance, the way that we present ourselves in the world, it's all banged up. It's full of cracks. It's full of wax. And what Jesus wants to do is he's like, look, just hold yourself up to the light. Just be in this word, just be in prayer, be in community, be in service to one another, walk in love. So just do that and I'll show you where your cracks are. And furthermore, I'll buy you. I'll purchase you, all broken and banged up and cracked, and I'll heal those things. And instead of that light revealing where you're broken, the light within you will shine out and it will illuminate the world around you. That's what Jesus wants to do. As Paul closes the letter, he says, and now abide in faith, hope, and love. These three, but the greatest of these is love. For those of us who put our faith and trust in Jesus, when he comes back and we step out of this temporal life and into eternity, we won't need faith anymore. You won't need hope anymore because you will see Jesus face to face. The only thing that's gonna last, the only thing that you can take with you from this life into eternity is love. Self-denying, self-sacrificing in service of another.